Hi, friends. In my conversation with Dr. Shruti Roy, she made this statement and it really struck me. If we don't support caregivers, we're failing the people who need them most. Caregivers are the backbone of families, yet they are often left without the help that they need. This is why Hero Generation is building solutions, not just sympathy, so caregivers can get real, actionable support, care management, information, resource, and it's free to start. No credit card, no barriers, just the help when you need it. Please join now at herogen.co. And caregivers, in the midst of all of that, I know it's important to find moments of peace in your day. And Zinnia TV offers beautiful, calming, engaging videos created especially for people living with dementia and the caregivers who love them. So whether you're looking to spark joy, have movement, or simply create space to breathe in your day, Zinnia helps make that possible. We invite you to visit zinniatv.com and use the code GATHER20 for 20% off an annual subscription. And I want to say thank you to our podcast sponsors for supporting us. They play a huge role in helping me bring this message to all of you. So today we are reimagining aging, not just as a stage of decline, but as a time to thrive, have purpose, endless possibility, and we live in a world that often views older adults through a lens of limitation. So how do we shift the narrative to one of strength, resilience, and connection? Joining us is Dr. Charlotte Yeh, a national recognized leader in healthcare and a passionate advocate. She has 30 years of experience as a board certified emergency physician, the former chief medical officer for AARP, and she now serves as the chief experience officer at Cherish Health and leads Yeh Innovation. She is helping organizations center care around people, not just systems. She brings her deep insights. This is such a beautiful conversation. I wanted to, pull out 10 sound bites to just constantly share with all of you. It's so impactful, and aging is something we all face, but this is how do we navigate that, and we're exploring how purpose, thriving emotion, meaningful relationships really change that. You're going to be surprised by the data, and we are going to discuss how we combat loneliness, ageism, the role of technology, and measuring what matters, how we can thrive mentally, spiritually, physically as we age. We all need to listen to this conversation. So here is my episode with Dr. Charlotte Yeh. I have with me today Dr. Charlotte Yeh. It's a pleasure. We've been looking forward to this day. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It is such a privilege to be here. I'm just totally honored.
It's just wonderful. And we were saying thank you to Josh Peters with Bluestone Physician Group for introducing us. I love that.
Right.
People are like, I know someone and I feel like you need to meet each other. I love doing that too.
It's the connections, you know?
Yeah, so super grateful. You have quite an extensive background. You've worn so many different hats: emergency physician, Medicare contractor, CMS leader, AARP, executive and voice, and now an advocate for reinventing retirement. When you look at your career, tell us more about what guides your work. How, it would probably take all hour if we went through every detail of it, but highlighting some of those moments for you.
Well, I think I have to say, being an emergency physician probably is so fundamental to who I am for several reasons. One, it's probably the most egalitarian place in all of healthcare because no one can be turned away from the emergency department. And no one wants to be there. So you're at a time of great fear, great crisis. And if I can offer some sense of hope and help and consolation at this time of great fear, there's nothing more rewarding.
Yeah.
I think, secondly, the emergency department is an incredible barometer of what works and doesn't work, not only in healthcare, but in the community. And if it worked, you don't come through our doors. And I would love nothing better than we never ever need an emergency department because we've solved all these problems that we face. And the third is I just love that it is sort of a slice of life, a slice of humanity, whether it's trauma, illness, all the crises that come, minor, major, that it is everyday people, ordinary people. And to be there, no matter what your status in life is again just a tremendous reward. And to say it's probably the one area where you see everyone.
You really do when you explain it like that. And also, I love that description of it being a barometer
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
what works, what doesn't work. Wow, isn't that
yeah.
true?
I mean, we're the first to tell you, oh, there's a flu outbreak because they're
Mhm.
coming in our doors, you know?
Mhm.
We're the first to say, there's got to be a problem in payment or financing because people can't afford, they're coming in through our doors. Oh, there's a big disaster, an event. We know because they come in through our doors. And so it is totally unpredictable and it covers the range. And as I said, it is so rewarding because no one wants to be there. They come in, they're scared, they're frightened. And somehow in those first 10 to 30 seconds, you've got to bond, create
Mhm.
that comfort so
Mhm.
you can do what you can.
Completely. And you
Yep,
are that one point of when we're in our typically worst moments, that sense
exactly.
of, yeah, that sense of peace, hopefully, right? Which you
Yeah.
are absolutely, and providing some support during that time. This is a question that as you were sharing, came to me about for older adults in the emergency room. Did you find that there was a common theme of visits, or was it just a variety of different types of reasons that they were there, or could you categorize if you had to think through that?
So again, with older adults, I think again because we see the whole cross section of people, humanity, etc. The first thing you realize is there is as much variety in older adults as there is in youth and younger people. So I can have two different 80-year-old women who've fallen down and broken their hip. And on paper, they all have high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, you name it, et cetera. And I can walk into one room and say, oh my God, Joan, I'm so sorry you broke your hip. But you know what? You are walking out of here. I just know that spunk and that excitement and sense of purpose and resilience. And I can walk in the very next room with everything being identical and take one look at Mabel and go, oh dear, this is probably going to be the end of the road. This is just one more that she can't cope or handle. So
Mhm.
for me, it's really identifying what is that spark that is going to help somebody get up, be able to walk out, give them hope. The second is you also begin to see a lot of difference in families, family dynamics. At one end of the extreme, you can see a very loving, beautiful family. I can remember one gentleman who had just filled out all of his advance directives, and the very next day, he collapsed in cardiac arrest. His wife got nervous, started CPR, and when he came in, we had this entire conversation. What does he want? What do you want? She said, can you just have him hold on until I can bring his children? And so this was, while unexpected, it was a very guilt free moment of letting go and letting him be with his family. You can see the other extreme, which I've also had, where grandma gets dropped off in a wheelchair and said, we can't handle this anymore. Okay, you just take care of her, and they're gone. No phone
Wow.
numbers, no contact. They're just gone, and
Wow.
everything in between. So to me, it gives a real flavor of
Mm.
what are the stress points, Where are the positives? Where are the opportunities in healthcare?
Yeah, again, the barometer, right? Even for that demographic. When we had visited, there was a conversation we had around reframing aging and how important that is. And I loved your viewpoint on that. And for us to understand, how would you describe the power of age? And we're going to kind of go into those misconceptions or myths around aging, which is so
Yeah.
important for us. Yeah.
So I'm so glad you asked that because um, I'm sorry, but your grandmother of today is not the grandmother of yesterday. So there are three really key areas in which we are so different now than we were in the past. Maybe we're not so different now, but we have so created this imagery that
Mhm.
aging is all about decline. And
Mhm.
what we have forgotten is there are assets that come as you age. And if we could tap into the assets so that we can also help with the challenges and decline, we could have such a better life in the way you want to live, and you have hope and optimism for how we might all age the way we want to. So the first is we are living longer than ever.
Mhm.
I don't know how many of your listeners know that 85 and older is the fastest growing population, 100 and older is the second fastest growing population. By 2034, we expect there will be more people over 65 than under 18, that it is really going to be shifting the dynamics that is both positive, but also how do we take advantage of this change? In fact, how many people know that according to the Department of Labor, there's only one age band in the civilian workforce that is going to be increasing between now and 2030. It's not the 18-year-olds, it's not the 20 to 40-year-olds, it's not even the 65-year-olds, it's 75 and older. Because
Mhm.
we are going to be working longer than ever. It's going to make up about almost 12% of the working population.
Wow.
Now, some of it is because we didn't know we were living this long and we don't have the financial security. But for many, if you retire at 65 and you're living to 85 or more, what are you going to do?
Right.
So you want to have something that gives you purpose, meaning, gets you up in the morning.
Mhm.
So we are living longer than ever. We are
Yeah.
also living better than ever. So there is a study that was in the Gerontologic Society of America journal that looked at from age 50 to 85 plus, saying, do you have any limitations on your health or that limit you in your work or your household duties? Of course, 50 and older, about 90% say, no, I have no limitations. How many of you would expect that the 85-year-old said 56% of the time, no limitations? There's a recent ARP study that, by surveying older adults, that people in their 70s and 80s, 49%, almost half of them, said, my health is excellent to very good, right?
Mhm.
But what's our image? It's all about decline. It's all hobbling. We have poor health, but that's not necessarily across the board.
Yeah.
And the question is, why are we always chasing after the failure to thrive? Shouldn't we be looking at who the thrivers are? We are changing our definition as a result of living longer, living better, of retirement. Over half of older adults say retirement, or 55% say retirement is really a new stage of life. It is
Mhm.
no longer that R&R where you drift off into the sunset. 78%, according to one survey, of older adults say they're very optimistic about their future. And
Mhm.
if you, even if you have chronic conditions, over half, 58%, say are very optimistic about their future. Our vision is very different. And I love that Gallup came out with a poll back in last year. They had a poll on a survey of happiness across the globe.
Mhm.
Overall, the US was like 40 or 23rd in happiness. So it was a real drop in happiness score compared to other countries. But if you looked at it by age band, the youngest of the age band, the under 30, we were about 62. If you were in your 30s to 60 to 30s to 60, we were about 42nd in happiness scores. So not great. But if you were 60 and older, the US happiness score was in the top 10. It was number 10.
Interesting. Yeah.
So we forget that your happiness score actually tends to increase as you age. And I like to say it's because you finally go, I'm not chasing my career. I'm not chasing after the family. I am who I am. You're just going to have to put up with me. And how do we tap into that? Sense of I'm actually comfortable. I have wisdom, better vocabulary, better emotional stability, better problem solving skills, better pattern recognition. And in fact, if you're an entrepreneur, you're 1.8 times more likely to be successful if you're older because you have bringing that experience to bear. And in combination with the novelty and the excitement of youth, I mean, that's an unbeatable combination. So the third thing is that older adults, 50 and older, are actually significant contributors to the economy. They contribute $8.3 trillion to the economy. Now, it could be changing with all the economic parameters that are changing now, but roughly speaking, the 50-year-olds contribute to the economy would if they were their own economy would be the third largest economy behind the US and China. We spend $600 billion in unpaid caregiving support and another 150 billion in charitable care. My favorite number is we spend $179 billion on our grandchildren.
Wow.
So why are we not thinking of the joy that we can also bring, across families, across communities as we age? So, and by the way, we do purchase technology. I think in the last years, we've gone up in technology purchases by 130%. And guess what? Older adults own on average 7 devices. About over 90%, 90+% actually own smartphones. And about 70% of 70 and older actually own smartphones. And they use them for email purchasing, social connection, texting, for all the same reasons that people under 50 use them for. And yet we don't acknowledge it. We don't recognize it. Our perception has not caught up to that speed. So if you actually look at media marketing, if you are over 50, you are 7 times more likely to be seen as negative. So if you think of under 50, about 1 in 10 images show you at home. If you're an older adult, 3 in 10 show you at home. You're seen as alone, dependent, and with a medical professional taking care of you. The 50 and older represent about a third of the working force, and yet only 14% of the images show you actually at work, and only 4% actually show you with a coworker. And yet we're out in the community, we're out and working. So part of our difficulty is the incredible bias and negative view of aging that surrounds us, whether it's in the media, whether it's in marketing, and we're seen as all the shortcomings and decline as opposed to how well we've been coping.
Completely.
So I like to say, this is not a Pollyanna story, because yes, there are challenges. Yes, you do have health problems. Yes, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, all of those things increase as you age, but it's not everybody. So I think of my dad, who's 96 years old. The first time he was hospitalized, he was 19 when he had a ruptured appendix. His next hospitalization was 95.
Wow.
And at the age of 95, he was diagnosed with 2 different cancers, Merkel cell, which is a skin cancer, the same one Jimmy Buffett had. And he was treated. His tumor markers are 0 for over a year. In the course of working that up, they do scans to look for spread. They found a colon cancer. He had a colon surgery because it was found early. He's cured essentially two cancers at the age of 95. And he is still going to tap dance classes.
That's incredible.
And he's doing this at a time when he has profound severe hearing loss, has a cochlear implant. So when my mother passed away, by the way, she was never hospitalized till she had appendicitis in her 80s. And then she passed away several years ago from non-smoker lung cancer. But because my dad has such profound hearing loss, he lost his great communicator. So what did he do? He learned how to use an iPhone. He uses speech to text captioning. He can FaceTime. We now host family Zooms. He follows the speech to text and can communicate on his phone and carries it with him everywhere.
Wow.
Now, is he perfect at it? No. But it's here to say old folks can use technology if you design it for how they live, how they want to use it. You understand what makes them tick, and you take into account accessibility from hearing to vision to mobility to cognitive decline, et cetera. But if you actually ask older adults, 64%, almost two-thirds say the technology is not designed for me. So no wonder they don't use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a little tip for those innovators out there.
It's
This is a huge market for you, but you
really,
can't design for you. You've got to design for all populations.
yeah, have those voices and
Yeah,
the at the table.
yeah.
Absolutely. You touched on so many myths that were busted by, right? Better happiness, using technology. It's so true. As you were walking through each one, I do think that our lens is so negative, and we've seen that. Why do you think the perception hasn't caught up, right? When we know, right, if the data is showing that, just curious about your thoughts on that.
I really do think it has to do with media and
Hmm.
marketing.
Hmm.
So it is very less likely that you see an older adult portrayed in the movies, on television, with any of that positivity and strength. And in fact, I think there was one study saying, oh, over 65, you're either in the military or you're in a politician, and all, not necessarily all the full capacity of life and aging, um, and you're less likely to have speaking lines, less likely to have dialogue, less likely to even be seen. And if you think it's that way for men, it's even more so for women.
Mhm.
So I think it's that perception. There's also, this is really interesting. Now, again, I'm only, I don't know firsthand for this, but there is a researcher in Singapore who was looking at that perception of aging over the last 200 years, looking at how books, written materials, media have portrayed aging for, since the early 1800s. And aging was considered very positive up until the late 1890s. It was full of wisdom. You were an elder. You were, looked up to, supportive of the family, the community, the elders, if you will. And somewhere in the late 1890s or so, that perception began to shift over. And the interesting thing, according to him, is that was when we started to classify diseases. And when we started to classify diseases, suddenly age was associated with disease. And
Interesting.
then it began to cross over into this negative view of aging
Wow.
because we're just a collection of diseases.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you shared that. So interesting.
And yet, there's another study that if we could even prolong our lives by 1 year, there's a guy named David Sinclair out of the London School of Economics, says that improving our longevity by even 1 year of healthy living, we could actually add $38 trillion to the economy. So
Wow.
we should be thinking about the multi-general
Right.
workforce. We're not having the birth rates to keep us going. How do we keep somebody healthy so we're not putting a drain on society, but actually we're contributing to society?
I have not heard that reframe when I read articles about longevity, they don't necessarily touch on that component of it, but that's a huge motivating factor.
Right?
Yeah,
Because you don't need as much workforce to care for you. You can
right.
actually be in the workforce to caring for others. And the multi generational workforce may improve productivity, revenue generation, and if you have a sense of purpose. So we can start going into what is it that gives you that little spark that
Right.
I think we have undervalued
Yeah.
in the age space. So right now, we think of age in a very medical sense. Oh, it's all the healthcare that you need and services. And we really have to fix healthcare.
Mhm.
And we have acknowledged it's also housing, it's income, it's education, it's transportation, what we call the social determinants of health. And yes, we need to pour those resources into the community to support people. So we also know that it's going to take a long time. So, is there something we can give people right now to help them cope, help them be resilient? And I call these the personal determinants or the personal protective factors. And there's many, many things that go into resilience, but my favorite three, because they're measurable, they're modifiable, and they're meaningful. I call them my three P's:
Mhm.
purpose, people, and possibilities. If you have a strong sense of purpose, what gets you up in the morning? You have more preventive services, fewer hospitalization, more doctor visits, which we want, and your telomeres look like they're longer. So when we looked at having a sense of purpose in our Medicare supplemental plan population, about 35% of people are low in purpose, right? You retire, what am I going to do in life? And that 35% costs us 12% more on a PMPM. Now, these are associations. I can't tell you what's causal and how we might fix it. P is for people. So, social connection, loneliness. Loneliness is subjective, how you feel. Social, network is how big is, or social isolation is how big is your network. They both matter. But we found that for people who are severely lonely, which is about 20% in the Medicare supplemental population, about 40% of loneliness, 20% are severely lonely, they cost us 20% more at PMPM.
Wow.
And then finally, that perception of aging. There's one study out there, this ageism that I just described. We all think, oh, this negative view of aging, that ageism probably costs us about $63 billion in healthcare costs per year. If you have
Mm.
a positive view of aging, you're 44% more likely to fully recover from disability, even in your 70s. And again, about 33% of our Medicare supplemental plan members have a negative view of aging, and it's associated with 33% higher healthcare costs. So imagine if what we could do is say, you know what, you might be old, but you're still valuable. You still matter.
Yeah.
And you are part of the community fabric that can change how you age. It
Mhm.
could change how much you spend on healthcare. It could change your sense of meaning and purpose and value.
And the three P's, that is something that's easy to remember,
Yeah.
right? Purpose, people, possibilities. Yeah.
So I like to say purpose, what gets you up in the morning. P for people. If you have people to do it with or to support you, then your possibilities, your hope for tomorrow become endless. And whether you want to use that possibility to pick what ice cream flavor you want, or you want it to save the world and climate change and anything in between,
Yeah.
it gives you hope.
Mhm. We need that hope for the future.
Oh, absolutely. That sense of community. And by the way, nobody's immune from aging. Unlike every other demographic pattern, you can create all these different pockets of different kinds of people, but every
Mhm.
single one of us is getting older every single moment of every single day. Nobody is immune from that. It is all of us.
Every day. I know I've shared that where it's like, we are all, it affects all of us because we
Yeah.
are all, every single human, no matter your age, all in the same place. Yeah. Let's talk about equity. How is aging an equity issue and how do we close those gaps?
So again, I think as I described, ageism is so prevalent. In fact, it's not just out in society, it's even in healthcare. So I love this study that was done in the UK. Now, it wasn't in the US, but in the UK, they have a list of digital health tools that any physician can prescribe to their patients. And it turns out that if you're under 30, the physicians prescribe that to the patients pretty much, you know, um, in most of their patients. But if you are 50 and under, they only prescribe it actually, if you're under 30, they prescribe it to 1 in 10 patients. If you are 50-ish, they prescribe these digital health tools only 1 in 25. And if you are 65 and older, they only prescribe you digital health tools 1 in 50. Now, really, I just said older adults use technology to the same extent as anybody else.
Mhm.
So it already shows the bias that we don't treat people in the same manner. And if you're older, you're less likely to have a ventilator, less likely to be offered surgery, less likely to be offered dialysis. Now, in some cases, it may be appropriate because that's what you want, but
Mhm.
it's not necessarily across the board. So that ageism is so prevalent.
Yeah.
And as I like to say, if we want to change that story,
Mhm.
if we design it for as you age, whether it's hearing, vision, mobility, cognitive load, it will work for everyone. Just like the curb cutouts are for people with wheelchairs, but who
Right.
uses it more than anyone else? Mothers with strollers.
Right.
So if we're going to think about age as an equity issue, then we need to think about how we design. And I like to say the 3 missing factors in design for older adults, among many, but the 3 that I want to highlight is 1, how about designing for joy?
Mhm.
Why are you 85 and you can't laugh anymore? Where is the laughter and the fun? Because we still laugh no matter our age.
Yeah.
The second is, where is the beauty? Where is the fashion? Where is the design? Okay. Somehow the design is all in your youth. Does that mean you can't be fashionable if you're 75, 85 years old? Of course you can. I love that there is a modeling agency in Singapore that you can't even apply unless you're over 50. So we should be thinking about that modeling across all body types, across all ages. And the third is obviously designing for connection.
Yeah.
Okay. If you've got 20, 25% of older adults or solo agers living alone in the home, then let's start designing of how we keep you integrated in the community. So if there was one mantra, I would say, how we all talk about, I want to have independence in the home. I want to be in my home. And we've learned that in the pandemic, if we made a home so perfect that you stayed in your home, and we learned in the pandemic that you are not a happy camper if you're stuck at home, right? We want to be out and about in the community. So again, my tip for innovators out there, or people who are caring for older adults, or people who are older adults, can we move from independence in the home to independence on the go?
Love that term. It's so true. And we put all this emphasis on aging in place. But when we use that language, right, when we really get clear on that, it's not emotion. And you also have this phrase I've heard you use called thriving in motion.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How do we embody that every day?
So here's how I look at this. Like, I don't know about you, but when I hear the term aging in place, and I hate that term, because what does it feel like? Little old lady sitting in a wheelchair looking out the window because you are immobile, you're stuck, you can't move because you're aging stuck in place,
Yeah.
is how it visually feels to me. What if we said, what about thriving in motion? Okay,
Mm.
let's not age in place. Let's thrive with flourishing in motion and aging in motion and thriving in motion. Now, what does this mean? Okay, sure, you could be that 0.001% that's a marathon runner, as you age. Okay, I'm not talking about that group. But if you're stuck in a wheelchair, it doesn't mean you can't read books to third graders. It doesn't mean you can't learn something new. So you can be in a wheelchair and still thrive socially in motion, right?
Yeah.
And even if you have cognitive decline, it doesn't mean you can't thrive spiritually. So one of my favorite stories, it's a
Mm.
young company that did virtual glasses, virtual eyewear for older adults with dementia to remind them of their old homes, where they grew up, their community, other pictures. And they have this beautiful video of a little old lady who was in a nursing home, hadn't talked or walked or talked to anybody for months. They put on VR glasses, virtual reality glasses, and she looks through them. Suddenly, she is standing up and laughing. Why? In her VR screen is a field of puppies, and she is laughing and giggling as she sees all of the puppies. So I think we have to remember that it doesn't mean you have to be vibrant physically. You can be vibrant socially. You can
Mhm.
be vibrant spiritually. And
Mm,
all of those are thriving in motion to me.
so good. I love that term. I hope that we all can shift our language because I do when I hear aging in place, it's the terminology that's just been pointed, right? But when you think about it, what comes to mind for me is stagnant,
Mm-hmm.
even alone, right? There's other, I could words to describe that, but I think thriving sets us on a track of the direction of our thoughts, right? It's like where your thoughts are, our actions will follow, and
Yeah.
um, so important. Yeah.
And any one of us can do this. So ARP at one point did a project with Soul Pancake. And one of the things they did was, how everyone says, "Oh, you look so good for your age,"
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
then you go, you don't say, "Oh, you look so good for somebody who wears jeans all the time." "Oh, you look so good for, somebody who's in the garden," right?
Mhm.
So what we really should be saying is, you look good, period. So
You
those
look
little things in our language can make such a difference,
good.
right?
Yes. Oh, so true. So true. We look at all of the different things that can affect our health. And I know a big focal point and something that you have touched on is hearing, what
Yeah.
we can do about that and why it's important that we address it. Why is that a focus for you?
So I like to say there's so many things we could be working on, right? Healthcare is a mess. Our communities are a mess. Um, you know, our loneliness is a mess. I mean, there's just everywhere you turn, there's so many, many things that we could fix, overweight, diabetes, et cetera. Um, I like to say if there's only one thing we can do, I would focus on hearing. And I'll tell
Mhm.
you why. First, hearing loss is hugely, hugely prevalent. It's two-thirds of people 70 and older. It's 40% of people 60 and older. And we already have reports of millennial and Gen Xers saying, "I'm having difficulty hearing in noisy places," which is the first sign your hearing declines. And yet we ignore that. There are estimates that hearing loss costs us $133 billion in healthcare costs every year. And in lost productivity from the loss of hearing communication, et cetera, it could be $1 trillion. And one of the most common causes of early retirement is you can't hear, because if you can't hear, you don't communicate, you get poor performance because you're misinterpreting. And yet the ageism is so striking that people will say, "I know I've got hearing loss. It just means I'm getting older. But if I get hearing aids, now I'm old." Now you say, okay, what's the downside of that? Well, we did this big study looking at uncorrected hearing loss at 2, 5, and 10 years. So I'll just take the 10 years because most people wait 10 years before they do anything about hearing.
Wow.
And at 10 years, you have a 52% higher risk of dementia, 41% higher risk of depression, 29% more falls. Your healthcare costs are 46% higher. That's $22,434. Now take that by two-thirds of people 70 and older. Can you see how many millions, billions of dollars? 47% more likely to be hospitalized, 44% more likely to be readmitted to the hospital, 2.5 day longer stays. You're less likely to have a usual source of care, less likely to have a primary care, less likely to adhere to medications because you can't communicate. And it is incredibly isolating. And so it's said for every 10 decibels of hearing loss, you can increase your sense of loneliness and isolation.
Mm.
So it is hugely impactful to your social life, hugely impactful to your healthcare life. And the Lancet Commission on Dementia says that hearing loss is the single biggest risk factor for avoidable hearing loss, 8%.
Wow.
You know, physical activity, hypertension, they're all in the 1 to 2% risk
Wow.
factor for avoidable dementia, and hearing loss is 8%. Are you kidding me?
My goodness.
And just most recently in the last year, there was a new study that came out that looked at people randomized controlled trials, so the gold standard, giving people hearing aids with and without with hearing loss. If you are at risk of cognitive decline, within 3 years, you could mitigate that cognitive decline by 48%. I'm going, are you kidding? And
That's
now the
a
technology
cool
is out
number.
there,
Yeah.
speech to text, captioning. First of all, captioning is a free service. If you've
Mm,
got hearing loss, you can get free text, speech to text programs, et cetera, through the FCC.
mhm.
And captioning was back to the design. Captioning was designed for people with hearing loss. And now 80% of people, even without hearing loss, use captioning, right? You're in a public space. You want to use captioning so you can read the movie or the video that you're watching. You don't want to be broadcasting everywhere, or you're sharing with somebody next to you. So, as far as I'm concerned, we should be addressing because it's hugely impactful on our lives. And now the technology, you can get over the counter hearing aids. If you have mild to moderate, you can do free hearing tests. The Johns Hopkins School of Public Health now has an app for free hearing number. So you can
Wow.
actually track your hearing. And my favorite, and I always am careful. I don't want to be promoting because I don't have any commissions, none of this, but there's an eyeglass company that just in the last few weeks has now launched eyeglasses with hearing aids built into the frame. So it's nothing in your ears. You put on the glasses, wherever you look, you can hear a conversation better, like
Yeah.
if you're in a noisy place, et cetera. So why can't hearing aids be considered fashionable, just like eyeglasses?
Yeah. More conversation about it. Yeah. And
Right.
the solutions, I think, too, are getting better and better.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
technology's improved.
Mm.
Um, and I like to say to people, you think you're old with hearing aids? You are old without hearing aids.
Yeah, because they can't hear. And then, like you said, if it, what, 48%
That
risk of dementia, then you're really compounding all of those factors. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 8% risk of dementia, but a
Mm,
48% reduction in
reduction.
cognitive decline
Okay, thank you for
if you
that.
have hearing
Wow.
aids. Yeah, it's huge. And most people are like my dad, who
Mhm.
waited 10 years. He couldn't hear. I'm a physician. I thought he was having dementia because he
Mm,
was sitting in a corner. He was angry all the time. He wasn't communicating until my mother got locked out of the house because he couldn't hear the doorbell. So he finally got his hearing aids. And 2 months later, he was sitting at the breakfast table, regaling people stories, telling jokes. And I went, oh my God, I thought my dad had dementia. And all it was, he couldn't hear. He suddenly was the dad I remembered,
mm,
joking, laughing, life of the party. So why
mm.
should we deprive ourselves of that joy of living
So much joy. Yeah, and thriving,
and
right?
thriving? Right.
We look at data quite a bit, and technology is giving us so much more access to that. And you've mentioned the importance of measurable data, meaningful data. How are you seeing technology transforming the way that we measure that, but also improving well-being for older adults?
Well, I think we haven't realized all the opportunities,
Mhm.
but I do see that acceleration. So, for example, historically or traditionally, your healthcare is a doctor visits, say, an annual visit. If you've got a chronic condition, maybe you see a doctor more often than that, or you get healthcare services. But the rest of the time, you're living your life. And how you're living, what you're doing, you're scaffalding. My dad's 96 and he was delightful as he is, his balance is still a little off, and I worry about him falling, or how's he doing at home, or is he taking his medications the way he should. So I do think there's real opportunity in remote monitoring in an
Yeah.
unobtrusive, not because you're a failure to thrive, but
Mhm.
because we want your independence. We want you to be able to live in your home the way you want to. So imagine if you had a fall detection service that wasn't a wearable that blared, I'm old, I'm frail, but something that was in your home. There's radar devices that can passively measure. What if through your TV, maybe through robots, maybe through other categories, you can connect and find out what's happening in your community? That you can now get rides through rideshare services or other kinds of services. You can connect with people in your community, your family. We have a family Zoom with my dad every week with family all over the country. We all get together, share stories. So, and then I love there's even companies now where, if you can't physically travel, they have live travel agents. We did this with our family, a live travel agent who was in Vienna at Christmas time. And so we just, while she was on her, camera, we could follow all of the markets in Vienna and hear about the colors and the artifacts and the arts and crafts and the food, in Vienna with the rest of the family.
I
Like,
love that. So many ways to connect. Technology is just incredible when
right.
we have so many different options.
But we need to make it user friendly for older adults.
Mhm.
If you've got hearing aids or difficulty hearing, is that compatible? What are you doing to make this visually easier to see? And if you have cognitive decline, you don't want to depend on memory, but icons that you can easily recognize what they stand for. If we design for older adults, it will work for everybody.
Well, and I loved your tips earlier on that. You are also, I think it's okay to share about this, let me know, uh, doing some work with an organization called Cherish Health, and they're
Yes.
doing really great work. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about the mission of the company and how it's changing how we're approaching, right, aging
So
and well-being?
Yeah, so that's the example that I mentioned earlier of using remote monitoring. So this is a passive radar. It's a device that fits in with your home decor. So it doesn't look like this medical device, that layers, I'm in trouble. It's basically a security peace of mind, looks like a speaker, sits in the home, and through the radar, it can go through two walls, 1,500 square feet, and there's no cameras, but it can just tell through body activity, a sketch, stick figure activity level. So it can tell if you fell. So it's a fall detection. It will immediately go out, whether it's neighbors, caregivers, connect to, 24/7 emergency call center, like with your alarm systems, for example. So imagine if you now think of a device as I can do doorbell alarm, smoke alarm, fire alarm, fall detection. It now is a whole wraparound of safety and security
Yeah.
that you can put. And it's designed so that we can add any kind of third party applications, whether it's a social connection app, whether it's sleep, whether it's uh, monitoring your activity. I mean, there are many different fall prevention training programs. You could add third-party apps to it. And I also love that it has cellular built right in. So if you don't have cellular Wi-Fi, it's a plug and play. You plug it in and it turns on. So again, think about the simplicity, think about the beauty, think about safety and security so you can live your life.
So good.
That's
Thank
what we
you.
should be deciding for.
I think so too. I think so too. And of course, the aesthetically pleasing is just an added
Yeah,
bonus to that. It makes us
right.
feel that we have something that's a part of our environment and not more of an eyesore, that medical,
Yeah.
that medical piece.
When I was talking about the personal determinants or the
Yeah.
protective factors, again, these are associations and not causal. But I love the fact that we looked at protective factors, 5 for health: resilience, locus of control, purpose, optimism, and social connection. Okay. These are kind of your psychological well being factors, if you will. So it turns out it didn't matter which one of the 5 you had. but for every one you added, it was associated with less depression, less anxiety, less fair, poor health, and less functional limitation. And if you go over to the cost side, for every one you added, didn't matter which one, your healthcare costs were $1,356 lower per year. So it was associated with lower healthcare costs. So I feel like we have been missing this whole sense of emotional well-being, happiness that can protect your health and make healthcare more affordable, or at least the opportunity is there.
Right, right. To be able to look at that. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And that ties into, I'm sure, if we look at those things, that gives us some hope on what we're able to modify, right, as we
Right.
age and have some empowerment and control over that. What else gives you hope for the future of aging?
Well, we know that resilience training works when you're a child, because if you teach resilience as a child, you have better education, better career opportunities, better income, etc. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we can say, if you missed it in childhood, you can learn at any point in your life?
Mhm.
And here's another little fun one just to think about. I mentioned, the importance of purpose,
Mhm.
giving back to others, etc. So there is a recent study looking at 62 reasons or risk factors for hospitalization. They looked at your diseases, your life behavior, all manner of things that are associated with hospitalization. And we
Mhm.
all know if you exercise a lot, you have less risk of hospitalization. So, sure enough, if you exercise on a regular basis, you have a 20% lower risk of hospitalization. How many of us knew that if you helped friends and family for 100 to 199 hours a year, that's roughly 2 to 4 hours a week, your risk of hospitalization goes down by 27%.
Mhm.
Is
Wow.
that speaking to community,
Yeah.
looking out for each other, social connection, joy?
Mhm. All of
That
it.
it,
Wow.
it could make a difference
Yeah.
in how we live, how we want to.
Mm.
And as I sometimes will say, we shouldn't be talking about how our life is finishing. We should be talking about how our life is flourishing.
So I could grab probably 10 amazing sound bites from you. Oh, the reframe and changing our language. Oh, that's a beautiful message. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Where can we connect with you and learn more and see the work that you're doing?
Well, if people want to reach out, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out on email, now that I've left ARP, I am now at this space where I've been a provider, a payer, a bureaucrat, a consumer advocate. I've been a patient. I've been a caregiver. I feel like I've seen healthcare from all these different lenses,
Mm.
so that now I'm working independently, advising, consulting. How do you pull all those threads together to give us that life the way we want to for as long as we can? So you can also reach me on my email through my little consulting advisory firm, Yay Innovation. So it's Charlotte at yayinnovation.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we'll include that information as well. But it's
Yeah.
been a joy. Again,
Well,
I've learned so much in shifting my language and your wisdom, your history, and how you are having us all think through aging in a new way and
yeah.
that we should be viewing it. So I appreciate you and your voice in this space. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's delightful. And I just have enjoyed talking with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.